Licensing Board. Please note that the meeting will be recorded and published online for access after the meeting. Can all attendees switch off their cameras and mute their mic when not speaking? A camera and microphone should only be switched on when you're invited to speak. I will now ask the clerk to undertake a roll call of the members participating today, and for those members to confirm their attendance once their name has been called by the clerk, that is clear in the recording of the meeting and can also be recorded by the clerk for the minute. As the Licensing Board contains quasi-judicial business, members are reminded that they should not leave the room or the meeting during the consultation of any application, and should they need to do so, if they could advise the clerk in the chat. If I could hand over to you, Mr. Munro, to do a roll call, please.
Yep, no problem. Morning, everyone. So, convener.
Here.
Councillor Cameron.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Dunbar. Nope. Okay. Councillor Grant.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor McClellan. Nope. Councillor Seller. Nope. And Councillor Townsend.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, that's fine.
Councillor
Thank
Grant's got his hand up. Convener,
Yes.
sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Grant.
Hi there, convener. It's just very briefly to advise that I have a phone call at 11:45, so I will dip out of the board if it's still ongoing, and then come back in and rejoin at the next item.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Grant. Okay, before we start into the business proper, is there any declarations of interest? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, if we could go on to the agenda. So at item 1, we've got the minutes of the meeting of the 27th of October. They're on pages 3 to 10. Can we agree those? Agreed. Okay, thank you. Right, the list of applications starts at 2.1 with an application for provisional license of the co-op. I'll hand over to Mr. Munro.
Thank you, convener. Oh, I see Councillor Sellers waiting in the lobby. So,
I think Councillor Dunbar is also, she's just texted me to say she's having problems getting into Teams, and we'll try by phone.
Okay.
See if we can get them in just before we start this application.
Yeah, that's. I was just going to check. Have you? I think I can possibly admit.
I have tried, and then he's bounced back out again. I've done it again.
Okay.
Oh, here he is.
Yeah. Morning, Councillor Seller. Can you just confirm you can hear us in your attendance, please? Yes.
Hello?
Hi, can you hear us, and can you just confirm your attendance?
Yes, I'm here, thanks.
Oh, that's
Oh, that's
Councillor
Councillor
Dunbar, is it? Okay. Hold on. Councillor Seller, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Perfect.
Right, okay.
Okay, right. Back to
Right.
yourself, Mr. Munro.
Yeah, thank you, convener. The first item is an application for a provisional premises license for the co-op in Mount Hooley Way. You'll recall that this one was deferred from a previous meeting. My understanding is that the NHS representation may have been withdrawn following an amendment to the layout plan, but the agent can possibly confirm that. There are the 4 public representations. My understanding is none of those are attending this afternoon, and I believe it's Ailey Barber who is representing the applicant.
Hey, are you there, Ms. Barber?
Oh, hi there. It's Ailey Maguire, not Barber.
Oh, Maguire.
Sorry,
That's
Ailey,
someone
that's
else,
my
but
fault.
yes, I'm here. Hi,
You'll answer to anything, I'm sure, as long as it's not bad.
yes. Absolutely. Good morning, Your Honours.
Okay, if you want to just fire away, because I don't believe any of the public have turned up.
No problem. Thank you very much. Thank you, first of all, for arranging to hear this application virtually today. As we've heard, this is an application for a provisional premises licence for a new purpose-built co-op store at Mount Hooley Way. The site is within the old Fire Brigade's quarters. It's been converted on the ground floor or at ground level into this new store with private residential accommodation planned for the upper level. The new store is intended to service nearby student accommodation and the residential area. and the planned investment here is in the region of £650,000. Now, I'm sure the board will be familiar with the Co-op operation. They're a very well-known, well-respected name. They have around 400 other stores in Scotland alone. The application form and the operating plan here are very much in line with the other stores across Scotland and indeed the Aberdeen area. And I think just quickly it's worth pointing out that the proposed capacity figure here, 25.75 metres squared, is really quite modest in comparison with other co-op stores. Their average tends to be around about 30 metres squared. Now, as we've heard, there is a NHS representation to this application. I am an that has actually been withdrawn, but I will address it just briefly. It obviously focuses on the licensing objective of protecting and improving public health, and makes reference obviously to the board's policy, which asks that applicants carefully consider store layout to discourage any impulse buying. And on the back of that, it has requested that the freestanding and end of aisle displays are not used for the display of alcohol. Now, these types of displays are pretty standard across co-op stores, and they're certainly not intended to encourage impulse buying in any way, but my clients have absolutely engaged with concerned, and we're more than happy to reconsider the proposed layout in light of that. And that was actually the reason for us requesting a continuation at the July board meeting. So the plan has been amended on that basis, and all of the displays in question have been completely removed, and that's resulted in a slight reduction in capacity. So I think that should deal with the NHS representation. I'd just like to touch briefly now on the public objections. Several of these raise issues which, from a licensing perspective, aren't strictly relevant to the application, such as littering in the local area, for example, and there's a mention of traffic concerns. That's obviously been dealt with separately under the planning regime. But there are a couple of common themes that I think it's just important to address, just to reassure the board. The first of these is public health, and there's a mention of potential substance and alcohol misuse in the area. What I'd say to that is that ultimately, as I've mentioned already, as far as the health objectives concerned, the NHS are really best placed to comment on that, and we've obviously dealt with their representation. But Co-op are obviously mindful of the concerns of people living in the local area as well. I do think it's important to remember that the current issues in the area can obviously not be attributed to Co-op in any way because they're not operating here at the moment. But we can assure the board that they would do everything in their power to make sure that they didn't contribute to any issues at all if this licence was granted. I think it is important to point out that this isn't just a typical off licence. It's a purpose-built and quite upmarket, to be honest, convenience store, much like a small supermarket. It's intended to carry a huge range of fresh foods and sort of more niche lines such as free from bakery, nutrition, that kind of thing. And they're also intending to create 20 new jobs, which I think can only really have a positive impact on health in the area. As far as the sale of alcohol itself is concerned, Co-op are very experienced operators, and they're very much aware that they've got a reputation to uphold here, and they take their responsibilities very seriously as licence holders. I just thought I would run briefly through some of the measures that they've got in place in that regard. They obviously have a very high level of staff training, which goes far beyond the basics, and that's refreshed on a regular basis. They are members of the Wine and Spirits Trade Association and signatories to the Portman Group Code of Practice. They carry a quite wide range actually of low and no alcohol ranges. They are more than willing and regularly do provide responsible drinking literature in store, in line with the health board, obviously. They don't get into any price wars. It's not possible because their prices are all centralised. They don't do any window advertising of alcohol at all. And all of their displays, importantly, are at the back of their stores. And that's intended to ensure that the alcohol isn't used as a way of tempting anybody into a store at all. So I hope that gives the board a feel for my client's attitude to the public health objective and provides a bit of reassurance that granting this application wouldn't undermine that at all. Now, if I just move on to look very briefly at over-provision, because that's another common theme that cropped up in the objections, and I think there are a few good points to make there. Firstly, obviously the board are aware of this, but it's important to point out that this premises doesn't fall within an area of over-provision in terms of your current policy. And you obviously carefully considered the statistics in coming to that decision relatively recently. Co-op did carefully consider the number of premises in the local area when identifying this site. So that is something they have obviously considered, and they came to the conclusion that the position is relatively standard for any urban area. Now, obviously, each application has to be considered on its own merits, over provision or not. But I think all of this considered, if this application was successful on that, it would be difficult to think of any other application that could be, to be honest. And secondly, just quite importantly on that over provision point, I wanted to make sure the board were aware that there's a co-op store nearby on George Street, which I think is actually specifically referred to in 2 of the objections. Now that store is actually due to close next year. That was actually due to have happened already, but the closure was delayed due to COVID. But that should be closing within Q1 or Q2 of next year before this new store is due to open. So effectively, it can be considered a relocation of an existing store. And the capacity that we're looking for at this new store is actually lower than is granted at the current store. So I thought it was important just to point that out. Ultimately, Your Honours, what Co-op are trying to do here is to provide a boost to the local community. As I've said, they're going to be creating new jobs, but they're also intending to give 1% from every sale made at the store back into local community initiatives like they do across the country. I hope that I've demonstrated that the benefits that this new store will bring should outweigh the objectors' concerns. My client is confident that this store will be an asset to the area and not detrimental in any way. And they will obviously continue to work with LSOs and police to make sure that no issues crop up as they do across the country. So I hope that addresses the key points here, Your Honours. I'm obviously more than happy to answer any questions that you might have, but otherwise I would commend the application to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McGuire. Questions for the applicant? I'm not seeing any hands. Can I just ask a couple of questions? You're obviously talking about staff training, and in one of the representations, there was comments around obviously people who maybe live in the area that have challenges with alcohol, etc. Do you keep a refusal book?
Yes, absolutely, convener. Basically, well, there are very strict regulations in place here with Co-op. Essentially, everything is automated and it's electronically recorded. So all of the refusals go through their electronic system, and the records are kept centrally in store and at head office, essentially for up to a year. So that can all be tracked back. But yes, there are there's a very strict level of record keeping going on at all stores across the country, and those can be audited by anybody who requires to see them.
And I assume that includes, do you operate Challenge 25?
Yes, absolutely. Challenge 25 is in place in all stores. There are actually electronic prompts on the till systems which require you to input the fact that you have either carried that out or not for each sale that takes place.
I'm not seeing any hands from members in terms of questions. Okay, is there anything further you'd like to sum up, Ms. McGuire, before we go to determine the application?
No, I think I've covered everything that I'd like to cover there. Thank you very much, Convener.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, members, we have the request for a provisional premises license. Are we happy to agree?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. Agreed. Okay, so that's a unanimous agreement. Okay, thank you very much, Mr.
Much
Have a lovely Christmas.
And you, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to item 2, which is Bridge of Dawn service station. We have, I believe, a representation from that, but I'll take Mr. Monroe to take us through the application. Mr. Monroe. Hello, Mr. Hunt.
Good afternoon. Good morning, even.
Thank you, convener. Yep, this is another provisional premises license application for Bridge of Dawn service station. There is in fact no representations for this one, but obviously the premises are potentially excluded premises, and the test obviously for the board to consider that they're not excluded if persons resident in the locality are or are likely to become reliant to a significant extent on the premises as a principal source of fuel or groceries. And obviously Mr. Hunter has submitted a presentation which I believe Arlene circulated around board members just the other day.
Yeah, I've received it. Can I just make sure everyone else received it? Anybody hasn't? No, we're okay. Right, Mr. Hunter, I'll hand over to yourself.
Thank you. Just as it's nice to see some faces, familiar faces, albeit in an unfamiliar setting. It just occurred to me that Mr. Munro has been watching too much Sky Sports, seeing as Ailey Barber is the female presenter of the football coverage.
I have just discovered that, yes.
Anyway, and Mr. Black, who's the area representative for this particular site, is on the call if it needs to be, if there's any particular questions members have in due course. But just by way of background, Motor Fuel Limited are a national operator. They've got 3 existing licensed premises in the Aberdeen area. So the North Anderson Drive, Dice Filling Station and King Street, which are all licensed by the board, and as far as I'm aware, operate without difficulty, are already licensed for you. So they're well experienced, and they have the measures in place that you would expect in terms of your Challenge 25 and your till prompts and so on. This application really comes about as a result of a kind of national review of their stores, as you might expect, with petrol retailers having been one of the, I suppose, the essential premises that have remained open. The demand across the estate has increased, and they've looked to see where they can improve their customer offer. So in this particular site, with their Aberdeen experience already, they proposed a relatively modest alcohol display of 4.2 square metres in the customer area, and similar to the way Ms Maguire was saying in the last application, the alcohol display is in a corner, not in the customer flow, so you'd have to seek it out rather than passing it on the way to the counter. And that, as I agree with what she said, limits the possibility of impulse purchases. You have in your papers a market research report. I don't know the extent to which you want me to go through. You've heard from me in the past about these types of reports and the purpose of doing them. The numbers that come through demonstrate, albeit I think because of the location of the premises, they're a relatively small but nevertheless proportionally relevant number of persons that are reliant on them for a fuel use. And from the comments at the end, it appears to me that it's very much people living in Bridge of Dawn who are going in that direction on Ellen Road to the north for their purposes of working. Certainly looking at the geography of the area, there is an Asda and there's a Tesco within the Bridge of Dawn area, but they're to the west and south of these premises. And I think if you're heading on the A92 north, these are I think the only petrol filling station north of Bridge of Dawn before you get substantially further up the road. So I think if that is your direction of travel, it is reasonable that you would rely on the premises. As far as the numbers concerned, is when you go through the report, so I can take you through the numbers in detail if that's required. But I say that in terms of the premises, they attract about 4,000 customers a week. And if you were to use the percentages in the report, you'd get about 120 reliant customers per week based on the research. Around about half of the locals who use the premises say it's their principal source. And that is reasonably consistent with the market research reports I've seen in other applications. For example, there's greater reliance on this premises than there were on Aberdeen Airport, which is a premises you previously agreed to license before, on the back of one of these similar reports. And the number of locals in terms of a percentage, although higher numbers in other premises, but for example, Red Moss, the Shell Red Moss, which you agreed to license, I think about 2 years ago, had a similar percentage of locals who agreed that this was a principal source. So I would submit on the back of that, and on the back of the approach the board's taken in the past, that these premises would meet the excluded premises test. Beyond that, there are no other representations on the application. You have a licence holder who is known to you and operates, as far as I understand, in the Aberdeen area without any difficulty. I would leave my submissions at that, but of course, if there's any questions from any members about the market research and there is a need to delve deeper into that, then of course I'm more than happy to do that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hunter. Members, questions for Mr. Hunter? I don't see any hands. No? Okay, I think you obviously preempted any questions that may have been coming. Members, it's a provisional license. Are we happy to grant?
Yep.
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, Mr. Hunter, that was an easy one for you today.
I have to say I didn't miss the 5:57 train from Glasgow, so if we can keep this format going forward, that would be splendid. But thank you very much, and best of the festive periods for all the members. Thank you.
And to you too. Thank you, Mr. Hunter.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. Right, moving on to item 2.3, which is an application for a variation of premises licence for the City of Aberdeen Distillery. Mr. Munro.
Thank you, Convener. Just before I go any further, can I just check? I see Councillor McClellan's with us. Just for the purposes of minutes, Councillor McClellan, can I just check that you were there for the start of the last item, but missed the start of item 2.1?
No, I joined halfway through the last item, so this will be the first item that I take part in.
So for the minutes, we'll put you down as joining for this item.
Yes,
that's fine. Thank you. Yeah, okay, thank you, Convener. Yes, this is a variation to the City of Aberdeen Distillery. It was an amendment to Children and Young Persons Access. I understand the police had some questions initially, but those have been clarified, and there is no police representation outstanding, and there were no other representations received. Everything is within policy.
Okay, and there's nobody here to talk to it. That's correct, isn't it?
No,
Okay,
that's right.
That's fine. Members, are you happy to agree the variation?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, so that's fine. Thank you, folks. Right, moving on to 2.4, which is a further application of variation of a premises licence for Adobe's Garden Centre at White Myers, Langstrath. Mr. Munro.
Thank you, Convener. We're going to follow a kind of pattern now, I think. This is another variation of premises licence for Dobby's Garden Centre. It was an amendment to the layout plan, which resulted in a slight increase in capacity. Again, there have been no representations or objections to this one, and again, everything's within policy. There is nobody here for this one either.
Okay, members, are you happy to agree the variation?
Agreed.
Agreed. Right, thank you. Application for variation of a premises licence at 2.5 for the Grape and Grain at 31 Thistle Street. Mr. Munro.
Yep. Again, similar story, variation of the existing premises licence. In this case, they're adding off-sales facilities to the licence between the hours of 12 noon and 10 PM daily. Again, there have been no representations or objections. The hours are obviously within policy. So again, there's no one here for this one.
Okay, thank you. Members happy to agree?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. That's fine. Right, moving on to 2.6, which is an application of variation for the premises licence of Inspire Cafe Ahoy, Beach Boulevard, Aberdeen. Mr. Munro.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Quite tremendously named Cafe Ahoy. Again, this is another variation to the premises licence, mainly adding facilities to the application. They're all detailed on your information sheet, and also the addition of off-sales facilities. Similar story, we've received no representations or objections in connection with this, and all the amendments are within your policy. So again, there's no one here for this one.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, there's quite a selection from magicians to literature to art events. So there's quite a selection they've added on to their operating plan. Are we happy with this variation? Agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Right. Next, 2.7 is an application for a variation of premises licence, Mackenzie's Grocers and Newsagents, One School Walk. Mr. Munro.
feeling like a broken record now. It's another variation to a existing premises license. Again, this is another amendment to a layout plan which has resulted in an increase in capacity, which is the reason it's before yourselves. Again, there have been no objections or representations, and again, everything is within policy.
Thank you, members.
I think Councillor Cameron has.
I was going to say, I've got a hand. Thanks, Cameron.
You looked lonely, so I thought I'd put my hand
you.
up. On page 163 of our papers, it shows the increase in capacity, and it is doubled. It may well be within policy, but I'm surprised that nobody raised this particular point, the LSO, or well, probably the LSO. To double the capacity in a relatively small store is certainly not something that should be ignored. I'm not suggesting that we should go against it, but just to nod it through didn't seem quite right.
I don't think we have anybody here to speak on it at all, do we either? Yeah, normally we would have heard from the NHS, I think, David, but there's been no comment in.
No.
I think
obviously, further to Councillor Cameron's comments, obviously we do have the LSO. If you want to bring Diane in on the call, we will be from because we have.
Sure.
Diane.
Yeah, it might be useful if we have from the LSO.
Okay, Diane.
Thank you.
Morning, everyone. This was one that Tara was dealing with, and there are no LSO comments. We haven't really looked at this and assessed it as an increase in capacity, due to the large nature of the increase. It's not something we would normally comment on, but obviously it's something we can take on board for future applications.
Thank you, Ms. Sandy. David.
Yes, I'm happy with that. I've just realised I've still left my hand up. I'll take it down now. Yeah, it was just something that jumped out when I was looking at the papers. But no, yeah, I'd be happy with that. Thank you.
Thanks for raising it, Councillor Cameron. Any other questions? Okay, so can we agree the variation? Agreed?
Agreed.
Right, moving on to the last application, which is at 2.8, which is the application for variation of premises licence. Morrison's 215 King Street, Aberdeen. Mr. Munro.
Yeah, thank you, convener. Yes, another variation of premises licence. Again, it's largely amending question 5F, which is relating to the activities that are carried out within the premises. I think again the police had initial queries on that, which have been clarified, and again there are no outstanding representations or objections, and again everything is within policy.
Okay, members happy to agree the variation? Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, super. Right, that's the end of the applications. We're now moving on to item 3, which is the request for an extension of a provisional premises licence at 21 Union Street. Mr. Munro.
Yeah, thank you, convener. As members will be aware, provisional premises licence has a lifespan of 4 years. And it is open to the board on application by the licence holder to extend that lifespan by such period as the board deems appropriate. But they can only do so if they are satisfied of A, that completion of the construction or conversion of the premises has been delayed, and B, that delay is caused by factors out with the premises licence holder's control. You'll see obviously the request in your papers. I believe the agent may be with us.
We have someone.
I certainly admitted him.
Yeah, that's I saw him. Oh,
Well,
he's
he
apparently
comes back.
meeting again. Okay.
Let's see there.
I think Mr. McDonald, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Mr. McDonald, would you like just to talk to your request for an extension to your provisional licence?
Thank you, convener. Yes, this is a cafe at 21 Union Street, not very far away from your council offices, so you may well be familiar with it. It was obviously 4 years ago that it obtained its provisional licence in the first instance. We did at that point apply for the clients for some occasional licenses, and as part of that consideration, concerns were expressed by building standards with regard to certain aspects of the way that the property was being used, and in particular, the basement has been an ongoing issue as to what the basement can be used for. And I think of late our clients have accepted the fact that they cannot cook in the basement. They've been their architect has tried all kinds of schemes, Your Honours, but it is clear that that's not going to be possible. So all cooking will now be done on the ground floor, and the basement will only be used for storage. Now, I think that is what was suggested initially to our clients. They'd hoped to be able to come up with a scheme that would allow a greater use of downstairs, but that has not proved possible. So it is now the case that my clients have accepted how they can use the premises, and it's a case of putting the paperwork in place to formalise that. I spoke to both my clients and the architect this morning, and that is in hand. And I understand that I'm not sure if it's an amended building warrant or a new building warrant, but that is now in hand. So that's the situation, Your Honours, and following correspondence with your clerk, we've accepted the fact that it would be inappropriate to apply for occasionals, for instance, until the paperwork is further advanced. So that's where we are. I would ask for a year because I think it may be a new building warrant, and just to allow us to allow the architect time to go through that process. I'm in your hands. Happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, that explains the letter, which I found a little bit confusing for a while. If I understood Mr. McDonald correctly, they have not had any occasional licenses, and therefore the premises has not been selling alcoholic drinks. Is that correct?
Mr. McDonald?
But that is the case. That is the case, Your Honours. I don't think any of them. The first ones were applied for 4 years ago, and I don't know if 1 or 2 were granted. But then building standards became aware of the issues, and they asked if they could be stopped. We have not applied for any more since then. There was no point. So no, there's been no occasional licenses granted and no alcohol sold.
Okay, so if we agree to the request for an extension of the provisional license, Mr. McDonald said in his presentation that he wouldn't be thinking about applications for occasional licenses until the paperwork was further progressed. I suppose that's where my slight worry is, that paperwork being progressed does not change the premises. Mm-hmm. So if the premises were deemed not to be suitable for occasional licenses up until this point, I would like to think that if occasionals were going to be applied for during the unused period of the provisional license, if we grant an extension, that there would have to be exceptionally good reason why there would be an application for an occasional, when what should really be happening is getting done, the premises up to standard and the provisional license falling because the full license is then given by the board or by licensing. I'm just slightly worried that we agree to an extension here and then we start seeing occasionals coming in. That concerns me a little bit. There have been issues with occasionals. I realise things have had to be taken a completely different way because of COVID, and I've been fully supportive of everything we've been doing in that. But I just worry that we're 4 years on, we haven't made any or I'll rephrase that. We're 4 years on, through nobody's fault, including the owners of the property. No progress has tangible progress has actually been made. And my worry would be that we extend this today, and the next thing we see are applications coming in for occasionals. Maybe we cannot put any condition on to stop that happening, but I think it's important that I feel important that becomes known in public, that should be the way we go if we can. And I'll stop there.
Okay,
Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thanks, David. Mr. Munro, I notice you've got your hand up. Do you want to respond to Councillor Cameron first?
A little bit. It's just obviously just to hopefully give a little bit of comfort in those terms. Obviously, the determination of any occasional licence applications would be a separate application, so it is technically different from this one. But obviously, from my understanding of the position that Mr. MacDonald stated, that the previous applications were utilising the basement area, which will no longer be the case. But regardless, and obviously I see Mr. MacDonald's want to come back in, and that's fine. He may have more information on that, but assuming, I was going to say worst case scenario, that's not the right term, but if we did receive any applications, then we would be happy to consult with building standards who had the issues last time, and again, if they did not feel it was appropriate, then those applications would come back to yourselves as well. So hopefully that there is that safeguard there. It wouldn't be the case that they would just go in and go through, because we would make sure that, given the issues that building standards had previously, we would check with them that they were happy with it, and obviously if they did have any more still retained concerns, even with the amended means of operation, then they would come before yourselves for determination anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Munro. Before I take you back in, Councillor Cameron, I'll take in Mr. MacDonald just in case he's got further things that would assist. Mr. MacDonald?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I understand these concerns expressed. If I can give some comfort in that respect, I think the granting of the extension that we've requested is really a separate issue from the ongoing occasional situation. So in no way would I consider the extension of the provisional as being in any way legitimising us applying for occasionals at this stage. I think what I agree, I had correspondence with Arlene about this, and when Arlene obtained a response from building standards indicating that they were still not happy, I didn't apply for occasionals. I said that I would not be applying for occasionals until such time as building standards indicated that they were happy. And I'm happy to proceed on that basis, if that gives your honours comfort, that so long as building standards have issues, that we will not apply or not expect occasionals to be granted. I think your LSO was right insofar as the main issue was the use of the basement for cooking, and that has been stopped. And so what I think we're going to try and do as part of the building warden process is have the building standards officer visit and say to him, look, you're here ostensibly to process the building warden application, but how would you feel about us applying for occasionals at this stage? And that's how I would suggest that we would like to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. MacDonald. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you. I was going to come in after Mr. Munro to say I'm happy now, and Mr. MacDonald has given me more comfort. So yeah, I'm happy enough with that. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, so members, can I suggest then that we agree to the request for an extension of a year for the provisional premises licence at 21 Union Street? Are we happy, members?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you, Mr. MacDonald. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honours. Obliged.
Thank you. Moving on, we have item 4, the outstanding annual fee payments for 2020. Mr. Munro.
Thank you, Convener. Yep, this is just the updated list. You'll recall that we brought it to the last board meeting. So obviously the payments were due on the 1st of October, and the board were reminded just to allow a little more time, given the circumstances of this year, I guess. The list is updated on where we are just now, so those are the ones that are still outstanding. So it's really just to bring that to your attention and to seek direction from the board as to whether you want us to instigate review proceedings for those outstanding ones now for the next board in February. Obviously between now and then we will continue to look to either have licenses surrendered if they're not going to be used, or seek payment of the annual fee that was obviously due in October.
Members, can I again recommend that what we do is we allow the LSO and our licensing team to continue a dialogue with the premises and to instigate review a review hearing, which will come to us in February, which will be quite some time into that, the year of the fees due. But I think given the circumstances and the fact we're coming into Christmas and everything else, I think it gives them adequate time to get, I think, the best response. And perhaps by indicating that we're going to bring it to review in February, it'll maybe focus the premises' minds on a date. Can we agree that?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, agreed. Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, we're now moving on to item 5, which is the Licensing Board Statutory Reports. Mr. Munro.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. We're just in the process of updating the equalities and mainstreaming documentation for the board, and it was really just to run through the sort of additions that we were looking to maybe incorporate into the report, just for the board's approval, I guess, and to see if any of the members had any suggestions for anything else that they think is worthy of inclusion. So there's not been a great deal of changes from the last one. The main additions are obviously the addition of meetings such as this, virtual meetings, and obviously hybrid meetings that we had, we have had as well, in terms of that can be advantageous for people who can't physically make it into the council offices for a meeting. So it's maybe worth considering that if hybrid meetings at least might be an option for, I was going to say when things get back to normal, I don't know if that's ever happening, but if we get back to a more regular meeting schedule, if possibly hybrid meetings are something that the board want to consider, so that people who are disadvantaged in terms of physical attendance can join remotely if they so wish. Similarly, we have the accessibility of documents online, that allows people to put them at the magnification that they require, for example, as well. Obviously, these will hopefully still be available in paper form for those that don't have online access as well, but it's an addition to the system, it's not a replacement. The policy statement, the equalities report has been was created prior to our policy statement. So again, we're just adding in the fact that a full equalities and human rights impact assessment was carried out at the creation of the policy, to ensure that we were compliant with all the necessary requirements there. And obviously there's been the change in legislation since the last a report, and that disability access statements are required for all new applications now as well. Now obviously we don't evaluate those as such, that they're simply a statement. That's what they are. We cannot go back to an applicant and say that that's not adequate. All we can do is publish what they give us. That's what the legislation says. So it's maybe a baby step, but it's something there that we thought was worth including as well. So as I said, most of it hasn't really changed, because obviously the equalities is always running in the background, so it's always been established in terms of our meetings, in terms of reports. Every report that comes to the board has the equalities assessment done before, and something sent to the equalities team to ensure they are happy for it going ahead. So that's where we are. Just in case, as I said, there's anything that hasn't occurred to us that possibly any of the board members think might be worthy of inclusion for us to take forward.
Okay, Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Munro. That was very helpful. I mean, I suppose it's just to start. We'll hear from other members, I'm sure, but just in terms of the hybrid nature, I suppose the comment I would ask or offer, and I'm happy to come in after this, but I suppose there's two elements to it, and that is whether board members attend in person or because it seems to me that we've heard today from Mr. Hunter earlier on that he had dialed in from Glasgow, I believe, for the agents or for the applicants who may not be based in Aberdeen, and whether they can dial in remotely. So I suppose for me that would be the two elements that we might want to consider as board member attendance and the attendance of applicants or agents who may be from afar. I'm open-minded.
I think what I'd add is obviously we have to make sure that the chamber would be available at the time of our board meetings, because clearly the other rooms are not set up to be able to facilitate this. And I think, Councillor Grant, in terms of people coming from out with the city, I think if you look at the greener agenda that we're trying to pursue in terms of limiting unnecessary journeys, I think that element, say Mr. Hunter coming all the way up for what is really, in essence, quite a brief interaction with us. I think it's something, I'd be certainly more than happy to support. I think it's important that if we can, unless, during COVID, obviously, I've chosen to keep the meetings online as opposed to taking people into the chamber, just to ensure that everybody feels safe and secure, and also to make sure that there's a fuller participation, i.e. from external members as well. So, I think, provided that the chamber, we can ensure that our meetings are held in there, which would facilitate, external board members and not external board members, external people coming to the board. I think it's certainly a very sensible, and again, for people with any sort of disabilities, that it might be a far easier access to the board. Councillor Grant.
Yeah, just very briefly, I'm in agreement with you completely.
Yeah. Have we got any other comments you'd like Mr. Munro to consider as part of the update? No. Okay, Mr. Munro.
Yep, no, that's fine. Just to come back a wee bit on what you've both said there, which there obviously are other factors such as those that we'll need to take into consideration. There are practicalities, and there are other reasons. The bit about people travelling from further apart and the greener side of things, those are obviously relevant, but maybe not for this report, because obviously it's the equalities and mainstreaming. So we would probably be focusing on the fact that it allows people who physically can't make the meetings to otherwise participate in terms of this report, but the other factors will definitely be taken into consideration when we're looking at the practicalities of it. So I think in terms of the report just now, I think what we'll be doing is we won't commit ourselves to it, but we'll obviously say that we're investigating the feasibility of continuing with hybrid meetings to ensure accessibility for all, or something along those lines.
And I think it might be quite helpful for us to make maybe get a comment just from the Disability Equity Partnership, just to get their view, because obviously with their representation it might just be helpful. Okay, thank you. Okay, with that said, I think you've got everything you need, Mr. Munro, so we'll move on Mr. Munro, that's the conclusion of, apart from the next board dates?
Yes, yeah, sorry, this was missed off the agenda. It was just confirmation of the board dates for next year. They were obviously set with the in conjunction with the council diary, so they should all be okay, but it was just to quickly run through them, and obviously we'll get meeting invitations sent out for you so that they're in the diaries. So the next one is the 2nd of February next year, and following that we have them on the 13th of April, the 25th of May, the 17th of August, the 5th of October, and the 28th of November. As I said, they were all set as part of the overall diary. So hopefully they shouldn't cause any conflicts with anything, but we'll get meeting invites prepared and sent round. At this stage we'll probably do the kind of joint thing of the committee room and the teams meeting, and obviously we can establish how the meetings themselves are going to go once we know what's happening next year.
Fingers crossed, Mr. Okay. Thank you all very much. Well, that concludes the licensing board part. For those, I don't know if you'll recall, there is a joint meeting with the licensing forum, which was carried on from the previous licensing board meeting. Mr. Munro, I just pass that to you.
Yep, no problem. So Arlene, if you want to stop the recording for this one now.